The University of Michigan auditorium hummed with the soft, steady current of anticipation. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows in narrow bands, catching the drifting flecks of dust like slow, golden confetti. The air carried a layered fragrance, fresh-cut roses and lilies from congratulatory bouquets, a hint of lemon polish from the wooden armrests, and beneath it all, the comforting drift of coffee from the lobby cafe. Every few seconds, a microphone crackled, a shoe scuffed, a program rustled, small sounds that, together, formed a kind of ceremonial hush. I adjusted my mortarboard again. The cap never felt right, either too tight against my temples or sliding back as if it didn't belong to me. The tassel ticked against my cheek with every breath, reminding me I was here, that this day was real and not a dream I would wake from into the same late-night shift and early morning exam. My name, Dante Rodriguez Williams, was printed in glossy black ink on the trifold program resting on my knees. I ran my thumb over the letters as if I could steady my heart by tracing them. In the third row, my mother, Carmen, leaned forward as if proximity alone could protect me from any disappointment. She wore her church pearls, the one she saved for weddings and graduations, and the navy dress she'd bought on clearance 6 months ago, just in case. Her phone was poised in both hands, elbows tucked in tight, to stop the tremor she couldn't quite control. Beside her, Jerome sat upright, broad shoulders squared, the crease still sharp in his borrowed blazer. He had tried to scrub the grease from his nails that morning. A faint shadow of it clung stubbornly beneath the cuticles, an honest residue of the life that had helped carry me here. The dean's voice, round and resonant, floated across the PA. Names rose and fell in the air like small prayers. Applause punctured the silence, brief and polite, then faded back into the sea sound of whispers. A toddler 2 rows behind me squealed. Somewhere, a proud Annie shushed him with a soft laugh. I closed my eyes for a beat and pictured our kitchen at dawn, my mother in her scrubs, steam fogging the window over the sink while she packed 2 sandwiches. One for her, one for me. Eat this between classes, she would say, and drink water. Coffee is not a food group, Dante. I could hear her voice now, firm and warm, and feel the heat of the oven even though she always forgot to turn it off until the second reminder. Jerome would slide a folded bill toward me, without looking up. For books, he'd say. He knew, and I knew it might end up covering rent or a bus pass or whatever gap threatened to swallow me that week. He never asked for receipts. Love, in our house, was rarely spoken and always itemized in sacrifices. Dante Rodriguez Williams, Dean Benjamin Hawthorne announced, the syllables of my name landing like 3 steady knocks on a door I'd spent 4 years trying to open. My roommate nudged me with an elbow, a quick grin. My legs lifted me before my brain caught up. The gown's hem brushed my ankles as I stepped into the aisle. Cold air licked my face. The stage lights, distant and white, flattened into a hazy halo at the front of the room. I inhaled once, deep, flowers-polished coffee, and started forward. Applause met me, polite at first, the way applause is for a stranger in a room full of other people's loved ones. Programs fluttered in hands. A camera flash sparked to my left, painting a ghost afterimage across my vision. I fixed my gaze on the dean's podium, the university seal gleaming like a coin balanced on the edge of possibility. Stop. One word, clean as glass, snapped through the air. I halted mid-step. The applause died, so quickly the silence felt like a drop-off in the dark. From the faculty section, Dr. Vincent Ashford rose. He wore precision the way other men wore cologne. An immaculate gray suit, razor crease, silver-framed glasses set high on a face that rarely betrayed surprise. He had been my professor for business ethics, a man who measured pauses and weighed words, who believed mercy belonged to private life and rigor to the public square. He didn't need the microphone. His voice, pitched to carry, threaded through the room with surgical accuracy. I heard my mother's soft intake of breath. Oh God, and felt, without seeing, Jerome's hand settle on her forearm, a quiet anchor. The dean's eyebrows twitched just once. Dr. Ashford? His tone was cordial, puzzled. The ceremony script did not include open resistance. Ashford stepped out from his row. His shoes struck the floor in even beats. If he was nervous, he stored it where no one could reach it. He adjusted the bridge of his glasses with a forefinger and looked directly at the dean, then at me, then, briefly, at the sea of faces. "Dean Hawthorne," he said, "I cannot, in good conscience, permit this student to receive his diploma without the truth being made plain." The sentence hovered above us. Somewhere in the balcony, a program slipped to the floor with a papery gasp. Heat rose under my collar. My palms went slick. Truth? What truth? 1,000 minor failures scraped across my mind. An assignment turned in late, a lab fee paid in installments, a quiz I'd guessed through on 3 hours of sleep. Shame finds a fast path to the surface when it knows the way. "This student," Ashford said, and his gaze pinned me like a specimen under glass, "is a fraud." The syllable rang, fraud, and then it multiplied, ricocheting off wood and stone, off memory and fear. A murmur rolled backward through the auditorium. Someone gasped, sharp, involuntary. The back of my neck prickled. The tassel tapped my cheek again, pendulum steady, as if keeping time with the thud in my chest. "Please explain your accusation," the dean said. The calm in his voice felt deliberate, like a hand pressed lightly to the lid of a boiling pot. I felt I relearned my face. I was no longer a name on a program. One of many, I was the story unfolding in real time. On the third row aisle, my mother's phone lowered half an inch. Her mouth was small and tight, the way it got when the doctor gave bad news in the clinic. Jerome leaned forward, elbows on knees, jaw working. Ashford didn't blink. For 4 years, Mr. Rodriguez-Williams has encouraged us to believe he is what he appears. An ordinary student, stretched thin by part-time work, scraping together tuition, borrowing time from sleep to keep up. A ripple of recognition moved through the graduates. Half the room wore that same description like a second skin. A few heads nodded. I recognized the posture of those nods. I had lived it. He paused, an edge added to the moment by silence, and then lowered his voice a notch, not to hide the words but to sharpen them. "That is not the truth." I tasted metal, fear, or adrenaline at the back of my tongue. A memory surged, unbidden. Ashford's office hours in November, his questions that felt like x-rays. "How are you structuring your time outside of class, Mr. Rodriguez-Williams? What compels your interest in applied ethics?" At the time, I'd answered in the safe grammar of coursework, case studies, frameworks, CSR. He had nodded, eyes too attentive, as if mapping the empty spaces between my sentences. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and withdrew a plain manila envelope. The paper made a dry whisper against the microphone as he unfolded a set of documents. The sound was indecently loud in the brittle quiet. "In the fall of 2021, he said, reading but not needing to, this student diverted funds intended for textbooks to purchase medical supplies, bandages, antiseptics, glucose monitors, over-the-counter medications, and distributed them at no cost to residents of Corktown. He organized drop-offs behind the community center on Lorimer and 12th. He lifted his eyes. That is not conjecture. A murmur, this one different, moved through the crowd, more breath and sound. On instinct, my gaze flew to my mother. Her eyes darted from me to Ashford and back again, searching my face for denial or confirmation. I had never told her. I had not wanted the money to become a conversation about risk. Ashford continued, slowly, precisely. In the winter of 2022, when Mrs. Fatima Al-Hassan, 67, faced foreclosure due to medical debt, this student organized a quiet fundraising campaign through small, anonymous donations and his own wages from 3 separate jobs. The amount transferred to the lender, $8,000. He let the number hang. Mrs. Al-Hassan remained in her home. The auditorium altered, felt, not seen. Postures softened. Attention, which had been sharp and almost predatory, eased into something more open, wary of where it had been pointed a moment before. I could hear someone weeping softly 2 rows up, a wet, careful sound, like a person who didn't want to be noticed crying in public. My hand had stopped shaking. A different lightness rose beneath the fear, a sensation like standing at the edge of a roof and realizing the ground is farther than you thought and nearer than you feared. Ashford shifted one page, and for the first time, his voice held something that might have been emotion. Last spring, when Kai Nakamura, 16, was diagnosed with leukemia and his family could not afford the proposed treatment, this student canceled his planned graduation trip, a trip he had saved toward for over 2 years, and donated the sum to the Nakamura family. The payments to the oncology fund were traced back through an intermediary to an account controlled by, he glanced up, Mr. Rodriguez Williams. A flashback, clean as a photograph. Kai's mother in the hospital corridor, shoulders hunched around grief as if it were weather, whispering numbers that didn't add up to hope. My mother, chart in hand, eyes fierce and gentle, the way she looked at pain when it thought it was winning. I had felt, then, a very simple certainty. If I could pull one brick from the wall collapsing on that family, I would. I did not speak now. Words felt small and performative. The metal of my own pulse thudded against my throat. Ashford refolded the papers with the same neat economy he used for everything. He did not return them to the envelope. He held them at his side and looked out over the audience, then back to me. So, he said, and the word was almost soft yes. Fraud. He has misled us in one respect. He allowed us to believe he was ordinary, when he has been anything but. A shape of stunned quiet settled over the room. The dean's hands rested lightly on the edges of the podium. The sunlight shifted on the far wall. My mother's phone dipped lower, her free hand rising to press against the base of her throat, as if steadying something inside that had started to shake. I didn't know where to put my eyes. I found Jerome's first, set, wet, proud in a way that felt heavier than happiness. Then my mother's wide, astonished, full of a pride that terrified me because I did not know if I deserved it. Beneath everything, I felt the peculiar relief of something long concealed stepping fully into the light and not burning to ash. Ashford took one breath, then another, and, breaking his own pattern, let a sliver of a smile crease the corner of his mouth. He brought his hands together once, a crisp, solitary clap that cracked the silence. For a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then the second pair of hands joined, then the third, and the sound rose, first uncertain, then certain, then tidal, until the auditorium became a body made of applause. People stood. Programs fell to the floor unnoticed. Near the back, someone whistled, sudden and bright. On the aisle, a faculty member wiped at her eyes with the folded corner of her sleeve. I stood in the aisle, the tassel tapping the rhythm, the breath I'd been holding finally leaving my chest, and I understood with a clarity that carried no triumph at all. Whatever came next would not be the same. The silence after the ovation felt almost physical, like the room had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe out. I stood in the aisle, hands useless at my sides, aware of the soft, quick steps of an usher hurrying a box of tissues down to the first row. Somewhere behind me, a baby fussed and then went quiet, as if even he sensed that the air had changed. Ashford cleared his throat, and the microphone gave a small, obedient pop. "There is more," he said, and the room leaned toward him as if tugged by a rope. He unfolded a second packet, smaller pages, handwritten lines that slanted in different directions, dotted with smudges and corrections. "These are testimonies," he said, "not offered for spectacle, but because truth belongs to everyone it touches." He read the first, voice steady, but softened around the edges. I never knew his name. He rang the bell and left the box at my feet. Milk, bread, cough medicine, new sock for the boys. When I told him I couldn't pay, he said, "Then pay forward when you can." We called him Angel Dante. When I found out he is a student here, I cried and put out the good plates. Isabella Morales, single mother of 3. A murmur, gentler this time, breathed through the room. I pictured Isabella's porch light flickering, the way her middle child peeked around her leg with big, serious eyes, the cat that always tried to climb into the grocery bag for warmth and mischief. Ashford lifted another page. He found me under the Michigan Avenue Bridge. People give sandwiches and keep moving. He stopped. He came back. He looked me in the eye when he said my name, Thomas, like it mattered what I called myself when I didn't feel like myself. 21 days later, I slept in a bed I could call mine. I start my shift at the loading dock at 5 a.m., tell him I show up on time. Thomas Blue Eagle, veteran. I felt my throat tighten. I remembered the first day Thomas wouldn't take the blanket because he said he hadn't earned it, and the second day when he did, and the way he folded it with precise corners as if that made the world less messy. The last letter shook slightly in Ashford's hand, or perhaps my vision had gone untrustworthy. You don't know me. I am Kai Nakamura's great-grandmother. When the bill arrived like winter, sudden and everywhere, an anonymous donation came like spring. Kai is alive. He learned to make dumplings with me last week, and he laughs with the sound I thought we had lost. My English is not good for big feelings. Please give this boy a chair of honor. The auditorium did not clap at that. It didn't feel like a moment for noise. It felt like a pew where you bow your head even if you don't believe, because reverence is a language everyone understands at least a little. Ashford lowered the pages and looked up, not at the dean or the faculty, but at the rows of students, at the families who had taken 2 buses to be here, at the grandparents who had packed oranges and hard candy for the wait. Then he looked at me. He took 2 steps forward, stopping a respectful distance away, and spoke in a voice only I could hear. I asked questions because I suspected. I kept asking because I hoped. Forgive the theater of this moment, but some truths need a room. I swallowed. You could have told me. I could have, he said, but then your instinct would have been to dim it. You've done enough dimming. He turned slightly, faced the stage. Dean Hawthorne, he said, voice carrying again, I submit that whatever else this ceremony is meant to recognize, this unadvertised moral labor, is the point. He stepped back. The dean placed both hands on the podium and let a long breath out into the microphone. The kind of breath that lets an entire room know you are choosing your next words with care. Dean Hawthorne descended from the dais with a deliberateness that made every step feel like a note in a song you didn't know you loved until you heard it. The stage lights made a pale halo on his silver hair. A student worker in a navy blazer hovered in the wings with a small velvet box, unsure of her cue, eyes bright. Dante, the dean said, stopping at the front edge of the stage. When you applied here, your essay spoke about wanting to make a difference. In admissions, we read variations of that line 1,000 times a season. He smiled, not unkindly. We file it under good intentions and move on. What we fail to understand is that you are already working the difference, not just wishing it. He gestured to the student worker. She approached, heels careful on the wooden risers, and handed him the box. He opened it so the light could find what waited inside. A disc of gold, simple and radiant, suspended from a ribbon the color of deep water. Gasps fluttered across the balcony like startled birds. The University of Michigan Medal of Honor, the dean said, is awarded once a decade. It recognizes not only excellence in study, but excellence in character. Not only the accumulation of knowledge, but the application of that knowledge in service of others. He turned the box slightly toward the audience, then toward me. The last time we awarded it was in 2014. Today we do so again. As he spoke, my mind slipped backward through the rooms I'd lived in. The basement studio with a stubborn radiator, the kitchen with 2 working burners and one that hissed out warnings, the library corral where I'd left notes for a student I never met, telling them you can do this, keep going. I thought of the faces that had inhabited those rooms with me in flashes. Isabella, Thomas, Kai. My mother at the sink with her back to the window, shoulders square. Jerome in the garage, white rag blackened in his hand, telling me to bring the car around so he could listen to an engine that sounded tired. Would you join me? The dean asked. I moved. I'm not sure my feet touched the floor. The world narrowed to the small circle of light at the front of the stage. The edge where the worn finish gave way to a darker strip where countless shoes had paused in the exact same spot. The dean lifted the ribbon with practiced care, and for a second, his hands hovered, an old, unconscious ritual asking permission to touch a life. I nodded. The ribbon settled at the back of my neck, cool and smooth. The metal came to rest against my chest with a soft, decisive weight. Not heavy exactly. Exact. The applause rose again, thicker now, Messier in the best way, threaded with cheers that began in the back and rolled forward, with a whistle from the balcony and a staccato clap from a row of professors who never applauded anything before the end. Someone started the chorus, too, for he's a jolly good fellow, and half the room laughed through tears and joined in, off-key and perfect. From the third row, my mother stood, both hands over her heart, and mouthed, "I love you," and I felt something inside me rearrange into a shape I had been trying to build without instructions. Jerome swiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, and then applauded harder, as if applause itself could lift the corners of the day higher. Ashford stepped close enough to speak low. "When I teach ethics next fall," he said, "I will tell them about a student who practiced it when no one was watching." His mouth twitched, "and I will grade them harder for knowing better." I laughed, short, surprised, grateful that my body remembered how. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it for the theater and the trouble, for the envelope and the patience, for choosing this room instead of a quiet office where truth might have stayed small. The dean nodded toward the far side of the stage where a line of graduates waited with fixed smiles that had begun to wobble in the corners. "Let's finish the business we came to do," he said, and the room, obedient and relieved, began to breathe again. I crossed the stage to receive my diploma. The paper was crisp, my name inked in a serif that made me look more official than I felt. When I gripped the dean's hand, he squeezed once with the kind of pressure that says, "I see you, not just your transcript." The metal swung gently when I walked, a quiet metronome against my sternum, counting out a beat I hadn't known I'd been missing. Afterward, the lobby turned into the kind of soft chaos that always follows ritual. People spilled into the light, programs folded into fans, bouquets held like small forests. The university seal and the mosaic floor served as both landmark and meeting point. Strangers hugged like cousins at a reunion that had finally arrived. I didn't make it 3 steps before a hand, warm and sure, caught my sleeve and pulled me into the full force of a hug that tasted like the citrus of her shampoo. My mother. She was crying and laughing at once, which made both acts more complicated. She held me at arm's length, wiped under one eye with the knuckle of her thumb, and then traced the rim of the medal with her forefinger as if checking whether it might evaporate. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, and the question held no scold, only the ache of wanting to have carried some of the hidden weight. "Because you were already carrying everything else," I said, "and because I want to see if I could do a thing that mattered without turning it into a performance." I searched her face. "I didn't want you to worry about the money, or about me getting home late, or—" She pressed her palm lightly over my mouth. "I was going to worry either way," she said, smiling through it. "That is the job description." Jerome folded me into his chest with a single solid thump on the back, then stepped away and looked at the metal like a mechanic assessing a well-tuned engine. "Looks right on you," he said. "Feels right in the room." We were quickly swallowed by a gentle wave of people, classmates, professors, strangers who were no longer quite strangers. Isabella approached with 2 children peeking from behind her legs. She introduced me as if she were presenting me to her own mother. Thomas arrived in a clean denim jacket, hair combed back, eyes clear. He shook my hand and didn't let go immediately, like some messages are transmitted better through grip than grammar. And then Kai came with his mother and a paper crane he had folded from the corner of the program. "For luck," he said, and tucked it beside the ribbon. Ashford found me again near the coat check, his posture relaxed in a way I had never seen in the classroom. "I am aware," he said, "that public praise can do as much damage as public blame if it teaches the wrong lesson." He tilted his head. "You know the difference." "I'm trying to," I said. "Good," he replied. "Keep choosing the work over the story about the work." He hesitated, then added, "But tell the story when it builds more work." Today was that. We stood together for a moment in comfortable quiet, watching the currents of families and friends eddy and merge. The world outside the glass doors looked newly ordinary. Cars nosing down the campus loop, a bus sighing at the curb, a line forming at the coffee cart that had fueled a decade of degrees. The sky had shifted toward late afternoon, the kind of blue that grows a rim of gold where it grazes brick. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Messages from classmates, from cousins and group chats I'd been muting for weeks from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be the director of the community center at Lorimer and 12th. We heard, if you have time next week, we could use another set of hands for the food distribution. But also, we want to plan something bigger. I looked up at the ceiling, at the square panels and the recessed lights, and exhaled a laugh that felt like a window opening. Back near the doors, my mother had stopped talking to someone in a blue dress to wipe more carefully at her cheeks. She caught my eye, lifted a hand, crooked one finger in a universal beckon that says, "Come be my child for 1 minute more." I went. She smoothed the front of my gown, as if I were 5, and rumpled from a nap. "You know," she said, voice soft, "the diploma will get you a job. The medal will get you meetings." She touched my chest over my heart. "But this, who you are when no one is watching, this is what will build a life. Promise me you won't trade it for applause." "I promise," I said, and felt the truth of the promise settle in like a foundation you can build on without hearing it creak. We stepped out into the brightness together, my mother, Jerome, and me, into the chime of phones and the click of heels and the far-off bark of a dog that had somehow wandered itself into the ceremony by proximity. The air held that thin, clean edge that sometimes comes after big weather, even when no storm has passed. The metal warmed to my skin. The ribbon lay flat along my collarbones. The crowd parted and closed again, making room the way water does. Behind us, the auditorium doors sighed shut. Ahead of us, campus opened into streets I knew and didn't know, lined with maple and plane trees, with corners where people waited for buses and chances. I felt the old urgency rise in me, not the frantic kind that runs from scarcity, but the clear kind that runs toward purpose. There are things you carry out of a room that are lighter than they should be, and things that are heavier. The diploma was lighter, paper and ink, promise and proof. The medal was heavier, metal and meaning. But neither weighed as much as the simple, durable knowledge that the work that matters most rarely announces itself and often begins with the smallest consent. I can spare an hour. I can spare $1. I can spare my attention. I adjusted the cap that still didn't quite fit and smiled. Some things don't sit right until you start moving. Then somehow they do.